Today, we're diving into the trans athlete debate, which is absolutely dominated headlines and sparking heated conversations across the board. We've got Trump making bold promises at West Point, Aaron Rodgers dropping truth bombs on Joe Rogan, and governors like Maine and California's Gavin Newsom throwing curveballs into the mix. This is a complex issue, fairness, biology, rights, and politics all colliding. Yeah, lots to break down today. Buckle up and let's dive in. So let's start with the big news out of West Point. Over the weekend, President Trump gave a commencement speech to the graduates, and he didn't shy away from the culture wars. Now, most of the headlines focused on the usual ceremonial stuff: military strength, American leadership, honoring the graduates. But buried in the speech was a line that touched directly on one of the most contentious debates in the country: transgender athletes in women's sports. Here's what Trump said.
There will be no more critical race theory or transgender for everybody forced onto our brave men and women in uniform or on anybody else for that matter in this country. And we will not have men playing in women's sports, if that's okay.
Yes, he said that to the cheers of newly minted Army officers. Trump tackled a cultural hot button issue that's been sitting right at the intersection of athletics, identity, and federal education law. And it didn't stop there. He followed it up with this.
How crazy is it? Men playing in women's sports, how crazy is it? So ridiculous, so demeaning to women. And it's over. That's over. We've ended it.
Now, it wasn't an off-the-cuff remark. It was clearly scripted, and it drew big applause from the crowd. Now, let's unpack that for a second. What Trump was pointing to is an executive order he signed on January 21st, just one day after taking office. That order prohibits male-born athletes from competing in women's sports at public schools and universities that receive federal funding. So we're talking about public K-12 schools, colleges, and universities across the country. It directs the Department of Education to enforce Title IX based on biological sex, not gender identity. And it gives the federal government authority to withhold funding from non-compliant institutions. Since then, the administration has already begun issuing guidance to state education departments. And yes, there are states resisting it. More on that in a moment. So when Trump said it's over, he wasn't teasing a future plan. He was declaring that it's already done. And this West Point speech was about reinforcing that position in front of the military's next generation of leaders. He also tied it into a broader critique of past military policy under previous administrations, saying,
They subjected the armed forces to all manner of social projects and political causes. But under the Trump administration, those days are over. We're getting rid of the distractions and we're focusing our military on its core mission.
So what you're seeing is a very deliberate messaging pivot. Trump framing the trans athlete issue not just as an educational or social question, but as one tied to military readiness, national morale, and what he repeatedly calls common sense. The media reaction was predictably divided. Conservative outlets largely praised the remarks as a strong stand for fairness in women's sports. Meanwhile, outlets like MSNBC criticized the speech. In a segment the next day, MSNBC personality Michael Steele called the comments a direct escalation of Trump's war on LGBTQ+ rights, saying the speech was offensive. On social media, the reaction was intense and immediate. Trump was accused of transphobia and discrimination, with critics saying the language was designed to dehumanize trans people. Supporters, on the other hand, called the moment long overdue and praised Trump for saying what most Americans are thinking. The topic dominated X for most of the weekend, with debate breaking out far beyond political circles, including current and former athletes. Whether you agree with the policy or not, here's the takeaway. This is now federal law. And if you're a governor, school administrator, or NCAA official, ignoring it could mean losing funding, or worse, ending up in court. And speaking of athletes,
they have a giant advantage. Stop pretending they don't. Just stop. And if you want people to compete, if you still want to compete and you're a woman, you should you should be protected and only have to compete against other actual biological women. Period. End of discussion. It's not bigoted to say
the trans women movement is actually anti-woman.
100%.
Now that's NFL star Aaron Rodgers, four-time MVP, Super Bowl champ, and apparently now a high-profile voice in one of the most polarized cultural fights. His appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience lit up every corner of the internet, and it wasn't because he was talking about ayahuasca again. In the episode, both Rogan and Rodgers slammed the idea of biological males in women's sports, going on to say,
It's the idea that that's bigoted is so crazy when there's a demonstrable effect. Like, you can clearly see that these people that are identifying as women but are actually biological males have massive advantage.
Yeah, but the people that you're asking those questions, whether or not who are not able to answer whether or not there's a decided advantage, can't even define what a woman is. So what
Exactly.
Are we talking about?
and this wasn't even some heated rant. They were calm, laughing even, which almost made it worse for critics, because it sounded like common sense to a lot of people watching. And look, if you believe that Rogan and Rodgers are simply the outliers on the issue, think again. A recent NBC News poll found that 75% of Americans oppose biological males competing in women's sports. That's not a fringe opinion. That's 3 out of 4 people. Even 2/3 of Gen Z, the most progressive and accepting generation, said they don't support it. And here's where it gets interesting. A growing number of voices on the left have said this isn't about transphobia. It's about fairness. Even some feminists and LGBTQ+ allies have pointed out that protecting women from unfair physical advantages is not discrimination. It's equity. This is exactly the argument made by very notable female feminist athletes.
I think the tide has turned in that we are kind of trying to find a solution that's equitable, that's fair, that's good for everyone.
I'm a great believer that people should be able to express themselves however they want to, with safety and dignity, 100%. However, there has to be fairness for everybody across society.
Now, both of these people are legendary athletes, both openly gay, and both are saying the same thing. You can support trans rights and still want a level playing field for women. So when a biological male who's gone through puberty races against women or fights them in a ring or lifts in their category, is that a competitive imbalance? And does recognizing that make you a bigot or just honest? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Now, on the other hand, Maine has been at the forefront of the national debate over transgender athletes' participation in women's sports. The state's refusal to comply with President Trump's executive order, which required states to prohibit biological males from competing in female categories if they wanted federal education funding, sparked a high-stakes legal standoff. Governor Janet Mills held her ground, arguing the order violated the state's values.
2 weeks ago, I signed an executive order banning men from playing in women's sports. Many Democrats are fighting me on that. I hope you continue, because you'll never win another race. The NCAA has complied immediately, by the way. That's good. But I understand Maine. Is Maine here, the governor of Maine?
Yeah, I'm here.
Are you not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it, because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply, because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding.
See you in court.
Every state, good, I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one. And enjoy your life after governor, because I don't think you'll be in elected politics.
In response, the USDA froze key nutrition assistance funds, including for lunch programs and childcare, citing non-compliance with Title IX. Maine sued, of course, and on April 11th, a federal judge ruled in the state's favor, ordering the USDA to unfreeze the funds immediately. The court made it clear if the federal government wants to cut off funding, it has to follow due process. No shortcuts, no political retribution. The USDA later agreed to back off, and last week, Maine dropped the lawsuit. A lot of people are calling it a win for due process and a reminder that executive orders still have to play by the rules. Meanwhile, Maine was also the stage for another legal controversy, this time involving State Representative Laurel Libby, after refusing to apologize for a Facebook post criticizing a transgender high school athlete. She was censored by the Democratic majority and barred from voting or debating.
Representative Laurel Libby now looking to the nation's highest court to try to stop her censure in the Maine legislature.
The Republican applicant from Auburn has filed an emergency application with the U.S. Supreme Court. It comes after 2 lower courts denied her request to restore her privileges in the Maine House. Libby has been unable to speak and vote on the floor since February. The House voted to censure Libby for a Facebook post where she named and shared photos of a transgender Maine high school student.
She took it to court, and just days ago, the U.S. Supreme Court sided with her, ordering the legislature to restore her full rights.
The Supreme Court ordering Maine state legislature to restore State Representative Laurel Libby's voting power after she was censured back in February for this post about a girls' pole vaulting competition, saying, quote, "Another day, another instance of a unremarkable biological male athlete who couldn't win against other males dominating girls' sports."
Justices Sotomayor and Jackson dissented, but the message was clear. Political disagreements can't override a duly elected representative's ability to do their job. Libby called it a victory for the Constitution, and whether you agree with her post or not, the legal precedent might ripple beyond Maine. Now, this isn't just about Maine. Even California Governor Gavin Newsom, yes, that Gavin Newsom, made headlines a couple months ago by calling transgender participation in women's sports deeply unfair. So when even progressive governors are starting to tiptoe toward the middle on this issue, maybe it's not so fringe after all. And that's kind of the through line here, right? Whether it's lawsuits over funding, high-profile suspensions, or unexpected political pivots, this debate certainly isn't going anywhere. But it's definitely getting louder and way more complicated. So where do you land on this? Is this a fight about fairness, freedom, or something in between? And how should schools and states navigate that fine line? Let me know in the comments.